Okay, I'll go ahead and start. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I just want to start off by saying a big thank you for coming. Technology is a really amazing and it's a tool that we can't imagine life without. It's not going anywhere, but unfortunately it has a really bad side to it, and that is kind of stealing the hearts and minds of our children. So, there is a solution, and the solution is going to come from parents. So, I thank you for coming, because it just means that you are here to gain information. The more knowledgeable you are just about and have an understanding of youth culture, it's going to open up the doors for compassion towards our children, and then also connection. And connection is where really you're going to be able to influence them so that they can be, screen smart children with emotional resilience. So I'll just start by introducing myself. Before I do, I'll just make a dua. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So, click here. Okay, so my name is Firoza Osman. I've been at EIA since last year. I came September 2021. Prior to that, I had spent 3 years with Edmonton Public School Board working as an EA. Before that, I had worked for IFSA for a year in a contract position where I used to deliver healthy relationship workshops to Muslim youth in middle schools and high school. And before I actually did that, I worked in the UK and England for 24 years. I am a trained teacher, trained as a primary school teacher. So I worked with teenagers mostly, and I was a teacher as well as a sexual health educator. I also have a nursing background, so that was my first career. I was a pediatric nurse. And I'm also certificated with the Digital Wellness Institute, which allows me to teach tech digital wellness. So in a way, you can use tech that promotes your well-being. I'm also the author of a book called How to Talk to Your Muslim Child About Sex, which is a book to support parents in having conversations in a God-conscious way. And that was born because working with teens for 17 years, I saw a lot of Muslim kids struggling, living double lives, and parents struggling to have those conversations. And I come to you as an imperfect parent. There's always more we can learn. I am also a coach, teacher, trainer with the Aware Academy Global, which is an educational platform aiming to raise awareness about the harmful impacts of pornography and irresponsible media. So it provides support to Muslims who are struggling with porn addiction. And then I have also done a lot of courses with Culture Reframed, and they're a health promotion effort to recognize and address pornography as the public health crisis of the digital age. So I've done a lot of courses with them, such as, raising teens in a hypersexualized world, helping their resilience, porn in the brain, helping my tween navigate online and offline friendships, and relating to their world, and so on. So we're going to be looking at the definition of porn, how much of a problem is it, when to talk about it, what to say to kids before they see it, what to say to kids after they've seen it, and then I'll give you some resources as well. So technically, the definition of porn is it's any material, printed, animated, visual, that is explicitly designed for sexual excitement. However, we're kind of going through the real pornification of our society. So as Imam Omar Suleiman said in 2020, though nudity and sexual activity are becoming more mainstream on cable and satellite networks, this doesn't mean it isn't pornography just because it isn't called that. So if we think a decade ago, what we see now would have been called softcore pornography, whereas now it's just mainstream and normalized. So, and it's this normalization of objectification of women that's alarming. So I was in the grocery store a few months back, and right at the checkout was somebody that used to be on a Disney show called Lizzie McGuire, and there was a side profile of her completely unclothed. So it's almost becoming this new feminism where I'm so comfortable in my skin that I'm going to show you my entire skin, and you better respect me for it. Then Imam Omar Suleiman further goes to say, as an imam, I can think of very few things that have wreaked havoc on pretty much every demographic in the community as pornography has. Yet how many khutbahs have you heard about it? So just to give you some sense of the scale of the problem, here's a few 2019 stats from just one website, bearing in mind there are thousands. So this is one from Pornhub. They get 115 million visits per day. Almost 7 million video uploads happen every year. And the porn industry makes up to 100 billion per year in profits. So there's a constant demand and therefore there's a constant supply. So according to Google, porn searches increase 4,700% during summer holidays, because that's when kids are off. 1 in 10 visitors to Pornhub now is under the age of 10. Porn sites get more visitors each month than Amazon, Twitter, and Netflix combined, and most porn is accessed through these humble little smartphones. So back even in 2008, 48% of kindergarten and grade 1 children, this was an American study, said that they had seen things online which made them uncomfortable. So in a nutshell, it's very much a porn-saturated world we're living in. So if we think back to sexualized media that was available when you were young. So if I think back to myself, it was the video store and it was in the back room. There was always a black curtain covering it. Or it was in the stores, it was behind magazines and shelves. So you physically had to have something if you wanted to watch any kind of porn. Whereas for our kids that have grown up, they only know a hypersexualized pop culture that's neither faith-friendly or morally compatible. So it comes at them, whether it's TV, whether it's ads, music videos, movies, clothing. This has just become very normalized. And we just have to remind ourselves that our children will not escape their mainstream culture and temptations just because they are born here and raised in a Muslim home. So the 3 most common sort of arguments that parents always hear from is, well, I trust my child. It's not about trusting your child, but you shouldn't trust the technology. And the technology is exploiting the fact that, the brain, the thinking part of the brain doesn't actually mature until the early 20s. And young kids, teenagers, they have no impulse control. They don't think of long-term consequences, so they just kind of live in the here and now. Or the second argument was not my child. That's a very common one, where in our community, people don't want to think that my child would be doing that. It's not a reflection of your parenting. If your child has seen pornography, if you have a son that's reached the age of 13, he has seen pornography. Doesn't mean you're a bad parent, doesn't mean he's not connected to Allah or doesn't have strong feelings towards his faith. The biological pull of pornography can get anyone. And lots of kids then end up living double lives. I've worked with a lot of kids that live double lives. So they're completely different when their parents see them to what they are actually like outside. Then the other thing sometimes parents say is, but we're Muslim. Your kids are actually Canadians who happen to be Muslim, so they are going to want to fit in and be influenced by their mainstream culture. So I worked at Emmy Lazert the year before I came here, and I worked with mostly Muslim kids. A lot of them were refugees that had only come to Canada within, say, 1 to 3 years. But I was very surprised how quickly they adopted some of the worst parts of our society. So, these girls were already twerking on TikToks, quite inappropriate videos. They were dating, and one of them, we were doing a writing exercise. If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would you choose? So she had only been in Canada 3 years, and she said, Cardi B. Now, Cardi B is a stripper who then became a rapper and is probably one of the most vulgar rappers around. But that's who she saw as somebody she'd want to hang out with for the evening. So we'll just look at some statistics that relate to Muslim youth. So this was research done by the Family and Youth Institute and Young Muslims. And they also did do a little bit of work, collaborative work with Nasiha, which is a Canadian-based Muslim helpline. So these are the statistics for Muslim kids. So 59% of Muslim youth do view pornography. So those are high school age. Those are kids that actually admitted to it, so that number actually could even be higher. When you went up from 18 up to about 24, then it was 72% of young men surveyed view porn, 31% of young women surveyed porn. The thing with young women is that seems to be a growing demographic that's becoming watching porn. So the last 3 parents that reached out to me, they were all Muslim girls in elementary school that were watching porn. They were 9 years old, 10, and an 11-year-old who was actually partaking in sexualized behavior with her 4-year-old sibling. So I was speaking to somebody else who does work in this area, and they said the same thing. We're seeing a lot more Muslim girls starting to watch porn. So how often are they watching porn? Well, 16% watch it every day, 41% are watching it multiple times a week, 43% are watching it a few times a month. And so are those who watch porn less religious? Well, 90% of those that watch it believe viewing porn is immoral, and 70% would consider themselves religiously practicing. So it's important just to note here, it has nothing to do with your level of religiosity. I had a friend in the UK whose husband was the imam at the mosque who'd show up 5 times a day praying, but he also watched porn every day. So it has nothing to do with how religious you are. Just as a general statistic, 93% of boys and 62% of girls will be exposed to internet porn before the age of 18. So going back to 2013, 100% of the calls from Canadian Muslim boys aged 11 to 14 years of age to the Islamic helpline Nasiha were related to masturbation and pornography. And most young kids, so 79% don't feel they can turn to their family for support. 64% tried to stop but don't know how. So no kid wants to be hooked into this, but they don't know where to go for help. Okay? So why is this happening? Well, in a 2016 interview, the founder of the online program Purify Your Gaze, which helps Muslims that are suffering from porn addiction, said teens start going online because of the void in discussing sex and healthy sexuality in our community. So that's the starting point for at least half of them. They're trying to get information. And we have to remember that more Muslim youth actually watch porn than don't watch it. 71% of youth hide their online behavior from their parents. And then the other top reasons young Muslims, this is going back to the original survey that they did, that they watch it is because of boredom, loneliness, worries and stress, and negative emotions. And we'll come back to those 4 things a little bit later. So would somebody like to answer this? You can shout it and answer. Those addicted to porn had one thing in common. Can you guess what it is? Somebody like to take a guess? What do you think they have in common? Teenagers that are addicted to porn. No. Well, they would have access, simply that, but it's just one thing that they all had in common. If they didn't have a phone, what was that? They're human. Well, close. It's actually, they had parents who did not talk to them about pornography. So where do these, so where is it coming from? First of all, obviously, it's smartphones. So even if your school policy is there's no smartphones in the classroom, kids do bring them to school. They share videos on the bus or the playground. My children were raised in the UK and England, and that was a big problem always on school buses. The older kids used to think it was quite funny to be showing younger children pornography. School computers, so even innocent searches can bring up inappropriate content that might bypass filters, library databases, mailing kids to erotic literature or pornographic books. Then you have slang terms, spark curiosity and often lead to online searches and pornography. And then sexualized conversations or behaviors which are acted out by children who have viewed pornography or have been abused. So according to the RCMP year, kids as young as 8 years old are sending nudes. This mom reached out to me because her 9-year-old had a Tinder account, Muslim girl, and was sending nude photos to men. So I mean, these are things that are also happening in our community. There's also a lot more child-on-child sexualized behavior happening at elementary schools, and it's all coming because of this. So it's important to remember that like our children now have access to instant, downloadable, high-resolution videos of unlimited variety of sexual encounters and endless supply. And unlimited variety is going to be groups, it's going to be same-sex, it's going to be all sorts of deviant, depraved kinds of content. And endless supply, because there's actually more than 200 new websites of porn go up every single day. So your kids have unprecedented access to free, hardcore porn from any internet-connected device. And it's free because that's the way the porn industry wants it to be. They want to lure children in. They're looking for children because they want them to be lifelong customers. So they start with a lot of free content, and then they get desensitized, so they start paying for more worse, more depraved stuff. Okay? So, I mean, you might have to pretend you're over 18, but if a child is curious, savvy enough, they can usually get by that. The thing to remember is that once you see something, you can't unsee it, so it can be quite traumatizing for a child. So it's not a question of if, but rather when will your child see pornography. So you might think, but my child doesn't have a phone, okay? But as long as they ever use a smartphone, any devices or internet without adult supervision, they attend school, or they have play dates, sleepovers outside your home, or they have older siblings, relatives, or friends, then they are at risk. And one thing I found is that a lot of Muslim parents don't tend to use a lot of filters. And a lot of that is just lack of awareness of the scale of the problem. So if we look at Alberta, in 2007, the University of Alberta did a study of 13 to 14-year-olds from 17 schools across Alberta. And their results were that 90% of boys and 70% of girls had seen explicit content at least once, and 1 in 3 boys were heavy porn users. Now imagine that. This is stats from 2007, and things have gradually gotten worse. Then in 2019, a clinical psychologist, sex therapist here in Alberta said that many teens and young people are consuming an increasing amount of porn. And there's 4 reasons why. The 4 A's: it's very accessible, it's affordable, because it's oftentimes free, it's anonymous, and it's quite acceptable. So conversations of porn are neutral or encouraged. Like even, you know, a great recipe and stuff, now you hear terms like food porn. So it's becoming normalized. I was watching an old episode of Law and Order, and in that show, you know, one of the detectives says, oh, all adolescent boys watch porn. So it's very much so normalizing that as that's what they do. Not recycling is actually considered more immoral than porn. So my son was exposed, one of my sons, to porn when he was 12. And both my children, I have 2 boys, have said that that's very much everyday teenage behavior. So the need to belong is strongest during the teen years, and their peers take on an increasingly important role. So peer pressure is very high for boys to watch porn. I can remember my son telling me, he was asked, well, who's your favorite actress? And he said, like, they meant porn actress. And he said, I didn't know what to say, but you're expected to, go along with that. And even an Aware Academy coach in Pakistan, so this is something that's kind of globally, our young people are going through it. It's the same thing. She said porn addiction there is at an epidemic level amongst Pakistani teens, and the peer pressure is intense. Lots of teasing, especially of boys, if they don't watch porn. So the other thing that's important to know is that porn can be accessed through lots of different ways. And, as parents, it's important just to also know that all the apps and video games are also gateways into pornography. So they may not necessarily explicitly allow porn on there, but there's ways for kids to be lured and get to pornographic sites through the sites. The other thing is they just can't keep up with things. None of those apps. So, things always get through. So, for example, on Instagram, which in 2019 was, according to CNN, was the #1 app for child grooming. And they actually did some research. So they set up some independent testing. So they set up 2 teen selfies accounts, put up 3 hashtags, liked a few other accounts, and within a week, both those accounts were getting hardcore porn sent to them by men. So Instagram, porn is often hidden behind hashtags and emojis that appear innocuous but are used as secret codes to tag and search for particular types of porn. So if teens type a specific fruit or vegetable emoji into the search bar, a list of links pops up to images ranging from women who are barely clothed to women in sexual bondage restraints. And those images lead directly to pornographic accounts, which are used by many porn performers to build their fan bases. In 2016, over 1 million porn videos were found on Instagram under Arabic hashtags. Then there's TikTok. So Instagram is popular with teens and kids, TikTok even more so. So TikTok started, it used to be called, I think musicality or something. So it's based in China, and it used to come across as just a lot of fun, dancey, fun videos. But there is an awful lot of explicit lyrics, lots of swearing, F-bombs in songs, suggestive sexual content, and they have some very strange and very antisocial kind of challenges that they expect kids to do. Like the year I was at Emmy Lazard, they were having kids rip out the bathroom sinks in your school bathroom, stuff like that, some very antisocial stuff. But the 2 alarming things that's happening too with TikTok is that they, obviously you have to be 18 to live stream, but kids, can get around those things. And what tends to happen is that you have men that are kind of luring these girls by making comments and then asking them for photos, and then they'll give them TikTok tokens, which can then be cashed in for money. And sometimes they lure them away from the site. And it's a way to make money for teenagers, and they're doing this kind of thing. It could start with, I'll give you $30 for a picture of your feet, but then you could see how it just escalates. And this is a new thing where they're always asking, starting with a picture of your feet. The other thing with Instagram is if you have at least 1,000 followers, then you can also put a link in your bio to OnlyFans. And OnlyFans is a new thing where people create their content and you pay a subscriber's fee. So maybe they're going to charge you $10 a month, $50 a month, whatever. But then it can be, they're producing a lot of porn performers, or even just teens doing lots of inappropriate things are starting to access these kinds of things as a way to make money. So it's again, it doesn't mean suddenly, okay, I don't want my kids on these apps, but you just have to know that, they are also gateways into some unsavory things. Then we have Snapchat. So Snapchat used to be one, whatever you have disappears. well, people could always screenshot. So Snapchat, technically doesn't allow adult content, but you have online businesses which help to manage and monetize premium pornographic accounts. So to lure traffic, the premium account is linked to a more innocuous teaser Snapchat account and other platforms, including Twitter and Facebook. And one of the biggest companies, FanCentro, serves as a channel to private Snapchat accounts and boasts that if one account is taken down, it will set up another one and redirect traffic. FanCentro also facilitates links from Snapchat to Pornhub, which is the major pornography site, in just a couple of clicks. The other thing with apps to know also is that, like, if your child has a phone, if an app's on their phone, it should be on your phone. You should start also with just getting to know apps. In the resources, I have some good sites that you could access that can help you just getting to know apps and also getting to know exactly what security settings you should be putting on your phones. The other thing to remember also is that wherever the kids are, the predators are. So there's always adults looking to groom kids. So we've got Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and then of course, video games. And again, video games really exploit a teen brain, which is really susceptible to addiction. So they actually hire behavioral psychologists to look for where in a video game is it the most addictive and where can we make it even more addictive. So video games that are designed for gaming and are popular with kids can also expose them to porn. So in fact, Pornhub reports traffic by game console, and from 34.7% came from Xbox, 51.5% came from PlayStation, and then a bit smaller amounts from PS Vita, Nintendo Wii. So there are porn bots on PlayStation and Xbox, okay? Trying to get your child to access porn in those things. They're very clever. They use teasers. They use very child-friendly images. So the porn industry now is also moving into the video game market with free games. So again, could be animated, but it's no less innocent just because it's animated, but they're trying to get kids. And then of course there's YouTube, which is another most popular one with kids. Now just so that you know, with kids YouTube, I watched a TED Talk, and this guy, he works in the IT industry, and he was talking about the autoplay where, you know, one video can they kind of look at the algorithm of what you're watching, and one video can just go into another. So it started off with this little math game and this cute train that a child could be watching. Well, a dozen autoplay videos later, it was Mickey Mouse masturbating. So there's always going to be, you know, even with the best of filters and stuff, it's not 100% foolproof, okay? And that's why the number one impact on how well your kids use tech is going to come from you, okay? So it's going to be your words, your example. Parental controls aren't going to actually eliminate the need to parent. So this is just going back to video games. This is Roblox, which a lot of kids, they're always drawing pictures and stuff about Roblox. And it's important to know this again, users create and play games together. So it's user-generated content. So Roblox sex games are commonly referred to on the platform as condos. They're spaces generated by users where people can talk about sex and where their avatars can actually have virtual sex. In these games, Roblox rules are thrown out of the window. And Roblox says these condos are hard to find, but the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, found inappropriate sexual language in legitimate games too. So just as a parent, it's important to just be aware of these things. So that's an image from an actual Roblox game, is to learn a little bit about it. So sit down, watch with your children. Always disable the chat function, because that's where a lot of predators are looking to engage with kids. Protect your safety settings, so use a PIN so your child can't undo those settings. And just to stay aware, so it should always be in a public place when your kids are playing games. You don't want them in a bedroom, door shut, and so on. okay? And it's just about communication. That's going to be, like we can have as many parental controls, but the number one most important thing is your communication with your child. Okay? So initial exposure normally is likely accidental. Usually they're doing homework, or sometimes something will pop up and they'll press it. But most boys go on to become active consumers, and that's usually around the age of 12 where they actually actively search it out. So what will they see? Well, studies show that nearly 90% of the most viewed porn scenes contain sexual, physical, and verbal violence against women. What your child may commonly see women experiencing, they're going to see their hair pulled, they're going to be spanked, slapped, gagged, strangled, verbal aggression, degraded, and rough sex. And there's worse things as well. So the script they kind of get is one of male aggression and female submission. And this has really kind of led to the hookup culture, the friends with benefits, one-night stands. That's very common amongst, especially university students. And my son, when he was in medical school, was telling me, and it really disturbed me because I thought this is the next generation of doctors, but he was telling me how his peers used to show off and brag about how they'd be choking girls and so on. And you just think, well, you might one day look after a sexual assault victim, but that's the script. This is what they think is normal. And it very much so becomes more, heavy users of porn become much more accepting of rape culture. So what is not seen in pornography is mutual respect and pleasure, consent, communication, and intimacy. So you have to be aware with your own child if you see any of these kind of warning signs. So does your teen withdraw from activities, shut down devices suddenly if you walk in? Do they exhibit changes in their language, demeanor, behaviors? Have you seen anything change? Are they spending long periods of time in the bathroom? Are they exhibiting signs of depression and or anxiety? So it's really important just to be tuned in every day to your child's moods, behaviors, if they start disengaging from the family. Because the effects of porn are quite significant. So we have to remember that the adolescent brain is going through major changes during adolescence, so it's very susceptible to addiction. It's getting rewired and pruned and so on. So when the adolescent brain sees a reward worth chasing, our body produces dopamine, which is our feel-good transmitter, to complete the task. So our brain wants more of this, and it's driving us to seek pleasure. Now, our thinking brain is countering that with some breaks, hopefully to say, okay, you've had 5 chocolate chip cookies, maybe that's enough. The problem is that with teenagers, their thinking brain isn't mature. So dopamine itself is not bad. In fact, dopamine helps with motivation, enjoyment, and managing our mood. So dopamine, makes sure that we eat food, that we procreate, that we set goals, and we find success. However, when dopamine is released as a result of pornography, so it increases by 200%, it's detrimental. Causes the brain to focus on pornography above anything else. And with repeated access, the demand grows, and it takes more and more to create the same effect. And the teenage brain responds 2 to 4 times more strongly than an adult brain. And porn actually changes brain structure, so the thinking part of the brain actually starts to shrink. And the parts that impact your emotion also change. So there's more aggression, there's more lesser empathy. And if you actually think of this toxic mix with adolescents, you have them, say your child is in a classroom of 24. With the statistics for Muslim youth, 14 of those are watching porn. Now you have their sex hormones show up, their dopamine release is high, their thinking brain, to put the brakes on, isn't developed. Now 14 of them are watching porn. 30% of the internet is porn. So imagine if the teacher had 3 magazines on her desk, and one of them is full of porn and the other 2 aren't. How is your child going to avoid that? It's near impossible. and add into that the peer pressure to be partaking in that. Okay, so these are the effects of porn. So for boys, it increases their isolation, feelings of loneliness. They start to get anxious, depressed, leads to erectile dysfunction. It increases sexual harassment and aggression, and it develops an unhealthy and unrealistic view of sex, and this can impact any future relationships because they will start to prefer porn to a real relationship. For girls, eating disorders, low self-esteem, and appearance anxiety, because I'm supposed to look a certain way, and they get a lot of that from social media already, and it increases risky sexual behavior. So how can I protect my child? Well, there are things that are protective factors which help. So the first one obviously is parents establishing restrictions, limits, and installing blocking software. So I mean, you try as best to keep it out of your home. Keep computer devices in a public place, not in bedrooms. TVs, phones, and stuff. And when you are establishing restrictions, limits, and so on, it's good to do it as a family to start off by just saying, I think we all need to look at how we're using our devices, because it's always better if you can get cooperation from your teens instead of just telling them what to do. Let them help become part of the solution, okay? So if with restrictions and limits, though, it's not a set it and leave it. It's just one layer of protection. Another protective factor is that this is based on research, religious adolescents and those in religious schools use pornography less frequently. So it doesn't mean they don't use it, they just use it less frequently. So it's important also that you role model whenever you're watching things with your children to lower your gaze when watching inappropriate scenes on TV and movies and actually talk about them. So don't shy away from that, but just why do you think I would have an issue with that, okay? The communication part is crucial. The other thing that's kind of a double-edged sword is that your faith can help you watch less porn, but at the same time, faith-based shame makes it harder to come out of addiction. So by the difference between shame and guilt, so shame is thinking I am a bad person, guilt is saying I did something bad. So a lot of times when Muslim kids get into porn, the shame is big because I shouldn't be doing this, it's against my religion. So you hold on to that and then they find it much harder to seek help for that. Okay, so it makes it harder to quit. The most important protective factors are comprehensive sex education from the time your children are young. So it doesn't have to be, and that could be, when your children are toddlers, you start using appropriate names for their private parts, not nicknames. You teach them about consent and boundaries. So you ask your child if it's okay to tickle them, because what you're saying to them is, your body is sacred and no one has the right to touch you if you don't want them to. You also just teach them boundaries like, whatever is covered by your underwear should not be seen or touched by anyone else unless, it's a parent helping them with toileting or they have to go to the doctor. So it actually starts from that age. Having open parent-child communication about hypersexualized media, because that's just everywhere. And non-judgmental listening. So even sometimes if your kids say things that you don't like, it's important to sometimes just listen. Don't let them feel condemned, otherwise they'll stop talking, okay? And affirm their core worth and strength so that it doesn't have to be, they don't get sucked into the whole, I have to look a certain way, I have to have so many likes on my Instagram accounts and so on. Because that's also when kids start having a lot of negative thoughts about themselves, that's also when they turn to porn. So interestingly, there is a site called Fight the New Drug. So Clay Olson, he's the co-founder of this, and he says there's a real disconnect between kids and parents on the subject of pornography. You can only help your kids if you bridge that gap with knowledge and understanding. So Fight the New Drug has received thousands of emails from teens and spoken to tens of thousands of teens at school presentations. And from their experience with tens of thousands of teens, they've pulled together these 5 things kids really wish their parents understood about pornography. Number 1, they wish you knew that porn can lead to an actual addiction. They wish you knew that porn is different today than it was when you were growing up. They wish you knew that they are being targeted. They wish you knew that you need to talk with them. And they wish you knew that you are part of the solution. So this was a presentation that he had given at a Coalition Against Pornography conference. Sadly, however, 79% of teens and young adults who want to stop using pornography say they have no one in their life helping them. Only 38% of 16 to 17-year-olds said their parents taught them about porn. Can I just ask for a show of hands? Who had parents that actually gave them sex education? My hand would be down because my parents said nothing. Your parents spoke to you. Sorry? Okay, but like your parents, did you ever get any education? No. Yeah. So we're the generation that has to change that. Okay, so it's important to just kind of consider your parenting style. So there's basically 4 kinds of parenting. So there's a permissive parent where you very much so let your children be the boss. Oh, I don't want my child to be unhappy. They easily cave in to the demands of their children. And there's a good book by, he's an author called Dr. Leonard Sachs. He's done some work in the Muslim communities in the US. And he's written a book. He's got 4 books that are very easy reads. Boys Adrift. If you have sons, if you have daughters, Girls on the Edge. Why gender matters, because the gender issue is a big thing, and I think that deserves a talk on its own. And The Collapse of Parenting. And what he says very much so in The Collapse of Parenting is that parents are afraid to say no. And so, very much kids are kind of running the show sometimes. So there's the permissive parent, where they let the child be the boss. The uninvolved parent, where kids are on their own. Authoritarian parent is the because I said so. So not giving kids reasons and so on. But ideally, you need to look at the best way to connect with your children, to influence them, to have a good relationship with them, to give them the best chance at also one day having a healthy relationship with someone is to be an authoritative parent, okay? Warm parents, the let's talk about it parents, you are responsive, but you have high standards for their behavior, right? They're clear, but there's room for flexibility, and it's kind of letting your kids know that you are the soft, safe landing if they mess up, because they will mess up. But they need to know that if they make mistakes, you're going to be there for them. So this is just kind of going through, because the average age of pornography exposure now is the age of 8. And there are Muslim kids in elementary school now that have been exposed to porn, that watch porn. So it's important to start those conversations. So there's just 3 little bubbles that could be things that you would say to your child if they are in elementary school. So if you were talking to a 5-year-old came and something popped up, you don't necessarily need to use the word pornography. If it was an 8-year-old, I would use that word, because they do need to know it, okay? So it might just be something like, there are people that don't make good choices of what they post online. You may see pictures or videos of people with no clothes on, showing their private parts, touching each other. This is called pornography or porn, and it can be hard not to look at it. And so you could say something also, like, I would like you to turn off your device and come and tell me so I can explain what you've seen. If you see things like this, you are not in trouble. These pictures might frighten, confuse, or upset you, and they're not good for your heart. brain and eyes. There's a really good book that's written by, she's a practicing Christian, and I always think, you know, tapping into other people of faith around these issues are good. But the book is called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And she's actually, the first book was for ages 7 to 12, I believe, but she's actually brought one out for 3 to 5-year-olds. Because, now she's not going to use the word pornography for a 3-year-old. If your child is on a device at 3, you do have to, and it's a very gentle way of just making sure they know, oh, sometimes, you know, somebody might be on there and they're not wearing their clothes, so you need to just come and tell me. With that age group, the basic message is to turn, run, and tell. So you turn it off, turn it away, you run and go and tell an adult. If it's a junior high child, then, you know, if you've never had a conversation with your child, then it's okay to be awkward. It's okay to tell them I'm really embarrassed and awkward, because chances are they are as well. And sometimes with that age group, it's easier if you don't look at them when you talk to them, but you sit side by side, so you're not, you know, they don't have to look at you. You don't have to look at the eye rolls and whatever may come as well. So with this group, you might say something like, this may feel embarrassing for us to talk about at first, but it's important. At your age, it's natural for you to be curious how the sexual side of a man and woman's relationship works. So one of the things you do just want to normalize is the curiosity, right? I mean, and Allah made adolescents curious. However, going online will give you all kinds of false and confusing information and images we call pornography. I want to give you the answers you need so you know how to deal with it. You can ask them, have you ever stumbled across sexually intense images or movies online that have been hard to get out of your mind? You won't get in trouble if you have. So it's important for you to normalize the fact that it's curious, that, you know, you'd want to know these things, and also that you won't get in trouble. Okay? Important also, because at this age they might just, oh no, like I've never, or they'll, oh, I know about that stuff. They don't want you to talk about it, okay? But you have to just persist and say, it's important information and we do need to talk about it. Because they'll also be concerned that maybe you're going to take their phone away, or maybe the friend's going to be in trouble or whatever if they tell you, oh, I saw something on my friend's phone. Don't use words like disgusting or say, oh, it's something bad kids do. It is disgusting, but because of the shame attached to it, if your child is watching it and watching a lot of it and you're already using the word disgusting, then it's going to be, well, that means I'm disgusting, okay? And we don't want to add to the shame. With junior high kids, it's also worth mentioning too that, like, you know, when you're watching porn, these are people that could have been trafficked, coerced, abused, and to perform. And so, you know, we're also helping keep that industry alive, you know, because junior high kids are also very much about fairness, ethics, and so on. So it's important also that they know those sorts of things. I would avoid kind of using words like haram, especially with teens. There's another way of just saying, you know, that's not how Allah intended a relationship to be seen and so on, and wouldn't be happy with, you know, it being watched. Without actually using the word haram. Again, it kind of goes into shame mode. And if they have seen porn, maybe, you know, you can see on the search history on the family computer, or you just notice a change in behavior and stuff like that. What's really important is that you don't panic, don't lecture, don't shame, don't raise your voice. Your posture, your facial expressions, everything is going to be mattering in that first situation, because that's going to give them information that, oh yes, you are that safe, soft landing, that it's okay, I'm going to be okay talking to you about this or not, okay? What you do want to do is, it's better for that first conversation if it's just one parent going in so the child doesn't feel ganged up on. If it's a daughter, better if it's a mom, dad, better with a son, but not necessarily. I know moms that have had to do all the porn stuff because the dads don't want to do it. That was the case for my husband too. He wouldn't talk to my kids, so I had to do it. So if they have seen porn, first thing I would say is just go and pray to Nuffle before you talk to them, okay? Because you are going to feel sad, disappointed, and so on. And what you don't want to be going in there with, what is wrong with you? I didn't raise you that way. I'm so disappointed in you. You don't want to be doing any of that kind of thing. You just want to ask questions and listen. You know, when did this start? How did it start? How does it make you feel? And just, again, sitting side by side so that they don't feel, you know, it can be a little more threatening that way. And so you're just asking about the facts, okay? And then you have to assure your child that you're on their side. Oh, I can see, okay, you were curious, maybe you got in over your head. It's not your fault because, you know, porn is looking for you. And it's very hard because it kicks our brain, kicks the dopamine in, so it makes it hard for our brains to stop looking at it, okay? And again, you gotta just reassure them that, you know, I'll always love you kind of thing. And then you just talk openly about the fact that, you know, that's not how our Creator, what you're seeing is fake. It's quite toxic. That'll come on the next slide. And you just remind them that, you know, we've been created also imperfect, so everybody makes mistakes, but Allah loves repentance. And then you have to work together. You set limits. And you have to then really look at what are the triggers? So does it happen to them when they're alone? The toxic trio of porn for teens is it's nighttime, it's bedrooms, and it is boredom. Okay, so these are some talking points. You want them to know that porn is not real life. It's fantasy. It's very addictive. It's going to fire up their brain. It's going to be hard to turn away. And it's going to have an impact on their future relationships. It'll start, there's just nothing good that's going to come from it. And it teaches selfishness, right? So it teaches people to look at other human beings as objects to use instead of people to love. And it encourages men to mistreat women. So those are some of the talking points. You as a parent then, what's really important also, because what they're not saying a healthy relationship is for you to also model what a healthy relationship is. And the characteristics of a healthy relationship are things like, they should see between their parents respect, good communication, safety, empathy, trust, affection, support, and an ability to resolve conflicts. So, Mufti Menk has said that children should see affection between their parents. So if your child wants a phone, is there a right age to give your child a phone? Well, the longer you wait to give them a phone, the better. But if your child, at the end of the day, if you're going to give your child a phone, then you need to have talked about pornography, about predators, about online behavior. And if you are willing to give your child a device, then you have to be willing to talk about the content on their device, okay? And your conversation could be, if you don't want your child to have a phone, my number one job is to keep your mind, body, and heart safe. You wanting a phone makes sense because you want to feel included with your peers. I understand that. However, I can't let you drive a car until you're 16 or eat candy for breakfast. I also can't give you a phone. I know you will feel disappointed because you feel like you're missing out, but you can do hard things. The rule isn't changing, but I'm going to be here to help you through it. I used to have the same things with my sons with gaming, because I used to always just say no. No to any violent games, underage games. And it was the same sort of conversation, because it was always like, oh, I won't have anything to talk about. I got nothing to bring to the table. And I said, maybe you need to move to another table. It's hard. I know that. I sat there when they cried, but you will get through it. And when they were 18, they came and they said, oh, we get it now. And I thought, oh, they're going to become binge gamers because they weren't allowed to game, and they never did, because then they developed other interests. So it's a tough one because a lot of parents just, they're going to be left out. But there's resilience that comes with also not just because everyone is doing it doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's right. So we move to, again, so this table is from, again, the Family Youth Institute and youth something, I forget now. But anyways, the original study that looked at Muslim youth and porn. So this is their support youth struggling with pornography. And what they put at the top is faith-based sex ed. And I will shamelessly plug my book here. If you don't know how to start those conversations with your kid, you can get a copy of the book from myself or from Amazon. And there's other good books around, but that also has to start with, because it's the curiosity that gets them into that. So you have to be having those conversations, right? And we are born sexual beings from the womb to the tomb. That is how Allah has designed us. So we're not actually, we have to, take back sexuality the way it was intended, because it's been degraded so much. It's candid conversations with family and community. It's giving them coping skills to regulate their emotions, enriching activities to combat boredom, hope and help rather than shame, and therapy if they're unable to stop. It's really important to build, because there's two things that kids are facing as well. One is very strong peer attachments, where they don't go to adults for advice anymore. They're asking another 14-year-old for advice. So the peers are taking an increasing importance in their life. You have to maintain the family as the source, as the number one priority. So, family traditions, you always eat together, no phones at the dinner time. You take your family time, go away, whatever. So if your 16-year-old says, I think I want to stay at my friend's house this weekend and not go on the family trip to Jasper, no, that's not negotiable. You have to really hang on to those family traditions. So, Abdullah ibn Umar reported, the messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, every one of you is a shepherd and is responsible for his flock. So it is your responsibility to protect, but also to prepare them, because you can't cocoon them. They will see porn. So what you want to do is help them develop their internal filter and protect their hearts and minds, okay? So that's going to require conscious, attentive parenting, consistent, layered conversations. So what does that look like? You strengthen their internal filter. How? So resilience is being able to cope with adversity and stress. So you start teaching your kids self-discipline when they're young. You're giving them ownership over a rule. So for example, if you want to play outside, you say to your child, then you put the toys away first. Self-discipline helps children learn delayed gratification and not give in to temptation. So for example, they can forego a TV show to study for a test. Self-discipline will strengthen their control over their thinking brain instead of their feeling brain, which will help them resist the pull of pornography in their teens. You also build their self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth. Okay? So they practice these skills. You give them choices, routines, limits, consequences. Let them experience failure, because it also builds resilience. We don't have to always protect our kids from challenges or obstacles. If they learn how to cope with things, instead of viewing pornography to cope with life stresses, because it becomes an escaping boredom, loneliness, my negative thoughts. Porn becomes their friend because it makes them feel good. So going back to feelings too, with young children, it's important to talk to them on a regular basis about feelings so they become comfortable discussing personal things. It's the training ground for later discussions about sexuality. You want them to learn how to handle unpleasant emotions so they don't need to escape them, right? So don't tell your children to not cry or stop crying, okay? You want to expand their emotional vocabulary, because children who can identify the causes of their feelings and clarify them will find it easier to manage their sexual feelings when it comes to puberty. It helps them know how best to react to that emotion. And then the other thing that's really important is, and that's the crucial key one, is strengthening their connection to you, okay? So it's always easier to influence your children when you connect with them before you correct them. So you strengthen their attachment to you by letting them feel seen, feel heard, feel loved. So when you pick your child up from school, do they Do you show excitement to see them? When they're talking to you, do you put your phone down? Because so many kids say, oh, my mom wants me to get off my phone, but she's always on her phone texting her friends, you know? So they're watching, they're taking cues from you. They need 3 A's: attention, affection, acknowledgement. Without all 3, they ask themselves why, and what they conclude is they're not lovable, not important, and not good enough. So, you know, when they come home and they've drawn something or they get a B grade and you say, oh, you could have done better. Well, to them, that was the best they did in that moment. So don't take that away from them. And we don't always have to look at our kids' successes, you know, academic. Maybe they're really good at being kind. Maybe they're really good with, you know, looking after younger siblings. So, you know, look out for those other things that are also good about them. Strengthen their connection to Allah by nurturing a relationship with Him based on love, which develops God consciousness, taqwa, and a desire to please Him. Okay, talk about Allah's design for sexuality. It should be kind, loving, respectful. It's sacred for marriage. So you want to be a proactive, not a reactive parent. And the only way to protect your child is to empower them with knowledge so they can resist the pornified culture that surrounds them. These are some really good resources. The first one is Protect Young Eyes and Defend Young Minds. So the Protect Young Eyes will go through all YouTube. It'll tell you exactly, this is how you set up the security settings on YouTube, on TikTok, on this and that. And it'll explain apps and stuff. It's a very good site. It's actually, again, Christian-based, very good. And the same with Defend Young Minds. Another, you know, the people that run it come from Christian backgrounds. So that's another good one. Better Screen Time, Culture Reframed, Halal Parenting. I wrote an article for them about porn, Fight the New Drug. And if you just want, Fight the New Drug. So if you have a teenager and you have never spoken about porn with them and you think, you know, they're going to be a bit like, oh, you know, you want to talk about this to me now kind of stuff, then sometimes the best thing to do is, if they don't want to have the conversation with you, Fight the New Drug has like some videos that shows about how porn affects the brain, and it actually goes through some young people telling their story of how they got addicted. Watch those with your teenager and then have a discussion. That might break the ice if they don't want to sit there and suddenly have that conversation with you. And then the last 2 are just good parenting support sites who do, especially Peace Within Home. She's a Lebanese Muslim who, she has a PhD in early childhood stuff, but she does a lot of things just about connecting with your child and stuff like that. So there's some just short stuff, but that's a good resource. Brave Muslim Parents is another good one as well. And then if anything comes up, and you want to get in contact with me, that's my email through the school. I have an Instagram account, Halal Birds and Bees Talk, which also covers a lot of this kind of material, and on Facebook. So I'm trying to be mindful of time. Yeah, bang on. Do we want to take questions then? Yeah. Are there any questions? Thank you very much again for attending, because it's kind of the, you know, kind of the real downside